Last night I had an Xbox Game Pass live stream. 6 hours of me going through a bunch of games that I've had sitting on my backlog on the Xbox One. Of course, I went through like Yakuza 0, Nier Automata, Stealth Inc. 2, um, The Messenger, like all this really good shit. But one thing stood out in particular. One thing stood out among the rest as being legit terrible. Like one of the worst things I've ever experienced. And it is a game I've played before. It is a game I know a lot about. It is something that has been discussed to death on this channel. But I really needed to come back and talk about this thing again now that I have a free moment to make a vlog about it. Undertale is on Xbox Game Pass right now for anyone to download, and nobody seems to have noticed or cared. It's kind of gone under the radar, which kind of proves my point when it comes to when it comes to the whole Undertale thing. Is that like Undertale had a very fringe audience on the internet, like crazy people, stupid people, delusional people who just bought the hype hook, line, and sinker and legitimately thought this was one of the best games ever made. And now that the hype has died down, now that people know more about it, it's not really a thing. You have a non-gaming audience who believes this game is great, and no one else really does. Like no one who actually knows a thing or two about RPGs, about indie games, about gaming in general really gives a shit about Undertale. And after my experiences playing this again, after my experiences like going through seeing those terrible visuals, like experiencing the combat for the first time, that awkward, annoying dialogue, like seeing this for playing this again was a complete nightmare. It just brought me back to like more than 5 years ago at this point when I experienced this thing for the first time, and all these gamers, like all these YouTubers, all these plebs, all these people trying to tell me it was great when really it wasn't, right? Like there was nothing special about it. And if anything, it was below average. Like no, below average is like is giving it a little bit too much credit. If anything, it was if anything, it felt like it had nothing really going for it. Like no positive attributes at all. Like the visuals look like they came straight out of Microsoft Paint. Like the character designs are terrible. They're not interesting. They're not funny. Um, the dialogue isn't compelling. It isn't interesting. The animation isn't good, and the music is plagiarized. I think this is the big thing that really gets me, especially like these days, considering how much hype this soundtrack got. But the music is indeed ripped from a wide variety of sources. I don't believe Fox really composed any of it. Like maybe that one track that everyone always praises, Megalovania, but maybe not. But I remember playing this, hearing this track when you're walking down the hallway, right? And I was just thinking to myself that I've heard this before, and it's not because like I played the game before. I think I've heard it in another game recently, another RPG, and I can't quite really place where. Which I think is the big reason why Fox hasn't really been called out on his plagiarism. But when it comes to his music, is that like he steals from such a wide variety of like niche sources, it's really impossible to trace any of them, right? Like the very name of the game, Undertale, like is derived from like cave story. It's so blatantly ripped. It's so blatant, and it's so like it's so transparent, and it's so disgusting in a way. Like how obviously like derivative this entire thing really is. Like there's nothing original about Undertale. Like there's nothing good about Undertale. Um Again, this is a game I would not recommend to anyone, right? Like I've always maintained, the game isn't special. It's not interesting. Um, there's nothing good about it. And yet, because of Fox's obsessive cultist fan base that, again, he had before Undertale, it got propped up and worshipped despite having no real credentials. It's essentially the opposite of what happened to Earthbound, right? Where you legitimately had this really good, interesting RPG that was quite different than its competition, that was not popular at all when it first came out, but gained a cult following because of its unique presentation, story, and gameplay, right? And setting, I should say. The gameplay is ripped straight from Dragon Quest. Earthbound isn't entirely original either in that sense, but it works. You know, like there's a reason the game was designed the way it is. If anything, I would say like people not acknowledging the gameplay is very very similar to Dragon Quest is is more indicative of like the typical Earthbound fan, a lot of which are posers, right? This is a phenomenon we really need to like address when it comes to like the gaming community. Is that like you can't take these plebs seriously, right? These people don't know what they're talking about. Just like Earthbound fans whining about not getting an Earthbound sequel when there are, countless Dragon Quest games to play and enjoy. You can't take Undertale fans seriously who call it the best game ever because they haven't played shit. They don't know anything about video games. This is a transparent fact we've been seeing on and off again for the past couple of years. And having played through a couple of like other indie games that I think are way better recently, Hollow Knight, The Messenger, Stealth Inc. 2. Like there are games on Xbox Game Pass right now that are far better than Undertale. I would say Undertale right now is probably like the worst game on Game Pass. No joke. I can't think of anything that on there right now that I detest as much as this. Like, yeah, I bitch about Ace Combat 7. Well, I actually enjoyed flying around in a jet. You know what I mean? Like it's not a great game or anything, but at the same time, it does what it's supposed to do. You know what I mean? Like it's an actual game. Like Undertale was just stupid from start to finish, and it really needs to be acknowledged among gamers. We really need to have some sort of method to like filter this kind of thing out. And I do think I do think like we made major strides in acknowledging that Undertale was severely overrated when it first came out. That it's not a 10 out of 10 game. That it's not interesting. That it's not funny. That it's not unique. It's not interesting. It doesn't have good music. No, it doesn't have good combat. It doesn't have a good morality system. Like we made major strides when it came to that, but I think like much like the 2020 election, like society should not have allowed things to regress this far. Like society should not have allowed our community should not have allowed this game to garner the reputation it's had. Like there shouldn't like Fox should not have this reputation as being this indie game auteur when he hasn't really contributed anything to the genre. When like he doesn't have any real talent, when he doesn't have like any real design skills, when he's not really relevant in any way. I think it's very very telling in the current age how in a right here and now how no one really cares about Fox's career as a game developer. It's entirely all they care about is trying to prove how popular he is. Like the last time I saw Undertale being brought up on 4chan, right? When I brought it up myself, talking about how I didn't like the Game Pass. Like all anyone could talk about was like, oh man, Fox is so popular. He met a toy. Like he went to Sakurai's house. Like he's meeting all these crazy popular Japanese game devs, and I'm just thinking to myself like, well, what does it matter? It's like he's a leech. Like that's kind of the comparison I came up with. Is that like he's not really talented in his own right? Like he's a sycophant. Like he is leeching off the success and popularity of other game developers. What did he do? What has he been trying to do? Like going to Nintendo, going straight to like the developers, name developers that we know, Atoy, Sakurai, the people at Game Freak, to try and like get his name down and like try to establish himself as like a credible game developer. And what happened? He worked on fucking Little Town Hero, right? And composed the soundtrack for that, which coincidentally doesn't have a very popular soundtrack that no one actually likes. Outside of his little bubble, right? Like outside of his little cult niche following on the internet, like Toby Fox is nobody. Like you can tell me he has a lot of money. So, like plenty of people have money who didn't deserve it, right? You can tell me he's popular. Yeah, in the same way that gaming YouTubers are popular. Like it's not something to be proud of or respect. You know what I mean? There's nothing to respect about Toby Fox or his game. And here we are in 2021. Deltarune is nowhere in sight. Nobody cared about it when it was free to play. I can't imagine episode 2 doing very well. Like his popularity is waning all the time. The people who played Undertale when they were like 10 either grew up and forgot about it or moved on to other things. Like Fox is irrelevant, right? Like Fox will never Fox will never have any real credibility. Like he's the Neil Druckmann of indie game developers in development in a lot of ways. And I think the main reason that there hasn't been more backlash towards him is because he's so irrelevant. Like he doesn't have a major studio, an entire console, like propping him up as like the messiah of video games, the messiah of indie games, like the savior of Earthbound-like games. Like like Toby Fox and the Lisa guy and like all of these other Earthbound hacks, like who are just ripping off this popular brand, are frauds, and they shouldn't be taken seriously. They shouldn't be listened to. They shouldn't be respected, and their games should be ignored.